Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to the first in our three-part webinar series, Westpac Smarts. Here we hope to share with you some practical tips and insights from some of our own business partners and customers to help you, our New Zealand business community, navigate the current uncertainty as we hopefully look towards a more predictable 2022. My name is John Machell, and I am Head of Hospitality, Tourism and Retail Trade for Westpac Business Banking. Today, it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to be joined by Zac de Silva, business advisor and founder of advisory firm Business Changing. Zac is also founder of a business called Nurture Change, which hosts business retreats in Fiji and Hawaii, obviously on hold for now due to the effects of the pandemic. We're also joined by Gavin Oliver, who is founder and owner of a tourism business, a New Zealand tourism business called EcoZip Adventures, based on Auckland's Waiheke Island. Gavin is also the chair of the Auckland Tourism Regional Forum, deputy chair of Waiheke Island Tourism Incorporated, and in all his spare time, he is a partner at DC and Associates Consulting, who are an experienced tourism, retail and hospitality advisory firm. Their mission is to help New Zealand businesses thrive and succeed. So yeah, welcome gents. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I really look forward to chatting with you over the next hour. So we're here this morning to discuss business planning and forecasting, and specifically how we plan for the future amidst such uncertain times. I'm really excited to be getting Zac and Gavin's perspectives, both in terms of their own businesses and how they've approached things, as well as how they've helped others in their various capacities and roles along the way. In terms of an agenda, the three of us will chat for 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open up for some questions from the audience, which we'll read from the chat box. So look, before I pass to Gavin and Zac, I just want to acknowledge how incredibly challenging the current environment is just to operate in, let alone to try and plan for. At Westpac, we do understand how difficult things are for businesses and their owners and managers at present, and we are absolutely on hand to work together with you through this period. To kick things off this morning, I thought I would just open with a couple of comments and observations from a banker's perspective on the topic of planning. So as bankers, we're in the business of supporting our customers to achieve their goals and their aspirations. Look, it's not only important for us to understand what these goals are, but also what the plan is to actually achieve them. And the better we can do this, understand your business and your goals, the more we can help you to achieve them. This applies whatever the situation, both through the good times and obviously through the more challenging periods such as what we're in now. Whilst in many respects, planning and forecasting is a challenge at present and is subject to significant potential variability, we do know that 99.9% of the time, a plan is better than no plan. A plan will serve as an important anchor and reference point for you to refer to and consider resetting from as the landscape changes ahead of all of us. A plan also helps your network, including your advisors and your bankers and other key people in your network, form our strategies for supporting you with the tools that we have available. And we'll talk a little bit more about this over the course of the session. And lastly, having a plan undoubtedly helps with setting a productive mindset. The mere act of putting one foot in front of the other will often provide you with that much needed direction, motivation, and confidence to keep going. Look, it's not always easy though. We absolutely acknowledge this, and we just to reiterate, we are on hand to help, and we do hope that today some of what you hear may assist you as you look ahead, whatever the line of business that you're in is. So look, I'll check back a little later with a few more of my bankers' perspectives, but for now, let's move to our guest speakers for this morning. Starting with Zac. Very good morning to you, Zac, and thank you for joining us today. Zac, why don't you give us a little bit of your own background and your history to kick things off?
Sure, John. Hey, thanks for having us today, and hi to Gavin and hi to everyone listening. Certainly, really good to be here and look forward to having a good chat and also doing good Q&A at the end as well. Hey, my brief background, just really quick, is I'm an accountant by trade. I started at Deloitte, ended up as the CFO for Flight Centre in the head office in Brisbane. We were listed on the stock exchange and, learned some really good stuff there. And then I, in the mid to late 2000s, me and another guy, we did a private equity and we bought Barker's Men's Clothing. So I was the managing director of that for a few years. That was cool. And we won a few awards. And because we won a few awards, whether I was good or not, people thought I was good. And I kind of thought, well, I've always wanted to help more than one business. So I went out, set up my own business, which is business changing, which is, why I'm here today. And I've been doing that now for 10 years. So I think I've done over 22,000 hours of coaching, and I've run let's say hundreds of workshops and all that sort of stuff. So that's my background. Obviously, John, you talked about nurture change. So, we've got some other businesses as well. And one of them is these retreats overseas where business owners go for 5 days to Fiji or Hawaii. We've had so far about 1,500 people come. We started in 2015, but obviously been on hold since 2019 or 2020. Hey, so John, do you mind if I just share, I guess, my thoughts around what a business plan is and what the purpose it should serve? Is that cool if I chat on that?
Yeah, no, that's bang on, Zac. Thank you.
Awesome. So I guess, so what is a business plan? So in my view, a great, well-constructed business plan will be your map to help you achieve your goals as a business. And I think, everyone knows that when you plan something out, the chance of you actually hitting your goals grows exponentially. And I find that, what happens is because so many businesses don't plan particularly well or even at all, where they end up here when actually they could have ended up here or here or here off the screen, because they just never took the time to actually think about, hey, what could we actually be if things went swimmingly well? And then they never took the time to actually work out what things they would have to do for, this level of performance to happen in a few years' time, rather than where they traditionally end up, which is, let's say mediocre. They end up at a B grade or a C grade, when with a bit of pre-thought, they could have thought about, hitting an elusive A grade. It's almost guaranteed, in my belief and experience, that a company with a well-considered business plan will definitely outperform those that never plan and just meander along in business. Because when you don't plan and you meander along in business, you spend so much time fighting day-to-day fires rather than doing that focused, proactive, strategic work. So I think ultimately, what is a business plan? It gives you some big picture strategic objectives to keep focused on. And it's just going to be a huge part of I think in summary, John, an effective business plan is going to be a huge part of a company's path to actually being the most successful organisation it can be.
Cool, thanks, Zac. So, what are the basic elements then that a good business plan should include or should cover?
Okay, I take a very simplistic view here because you can Google and get a business plan template, and whilst there are some simple ones, most of them are quite verbose, very long. I believe that a great business plan simply just has 3 key elements, and this is the outputs of the business plan. Obviously, a lot goes into getting the outputs, but this is the 3 key elements I reckon that you've got to have in a great business plan. I think the first thing is you need to really know what your future success looks like. So I mean both longer term and shorter term. Longer term might be anywhere from 3 to 10 years, and shorter term is probably 12 months to 3 years. You've got to be really sure on what actually success looks like, because that's going to help you ultimately come up with the right plan to give you a higher chance of hitting those, let's say, wanted or dream-like future views of success. Now, secondly, I think the most important part actually of your business plan is, once you've identified what your future success looks like, it's to come up with what are the best business strategies for you and your business over the short term. Yes, medium and long-term business strategies are really important as well, but actually what's most important right in front of you right now is actually the next, say, 12 months. I appreciate in COVID times that's a bit different. We'll chat a bit on that later. But you've actually got to come up with what are some strategies. Now, people get very confused about strategies, what it actually means. I used to get really confused myself. Strategies really are just what are some big picture objectives that if you can deliver on them, your business is going to perform at the next level. And a little hint to everybody listening, if you want, let's say you're a business owner or someone senior in your business, a big part of your job description over the next 12 months should actually be you working on those business strategies you've identified. That's a huge part of your job description. So you've got to actually make sure you find time to put into the business strategies. That's the second part. So first part, future view of success. Second part is come up with the right strategies. Now that's great. And if you just have strategies, you'll probably be more successful because in the back of your mind, you'll hopefully remember the strategies. But actually another really key thing is to consider each strategy one by one and come up with what I call tactics. Tactics are like action points, to-dos, tasks, whatever. But what actual tactics do you need to deliver on each strategy that will mean that ultimately, yes, you have actually again delivered on the strategy because you've done the 33 things or the 5 things or whatever it is that you've identified, that the actual action points relating to you delivering on each strategy. So summary, John, is they're the 3 things. So have clarity on your future views of success, then identify the strategies you need to do, especially in the next 12 months. So they're the big picture objectives and things that will get you to where you want to go. And then from that, you've got to create all of the tactics, a la action points that you need to deliver on each strategy to give yourself the best opportunity of hitting your future views of success. And that's my view, John.
Cool. Thanks, Zac. And look, I absolutely agree with your points there around. Sorry, my phone is ringing. That's very embarrassing. Really agree with your point around keeping it simple. I think it's very easy to get lost in the kind of I don't know, the mystery or the science of kind of strategy, and when really I think the best thing to do is to keep it simple. So that's really useful. Thank you for that, Zac. Moving now to Gavin. Good morning, Gavin. Great to have you here. Thanks for making the time to join us. Gavin, you are a business owner, and as well as being heavily involved in the tourism industry. To kick things off, why don't you tell us a little bit more about EcoZip Adventures, how it came to be, and how you have approached business planning?
Yeah, thanks, John, and good morning, Zac. And I must admit, had I had a notepad, I might have been scribbishly firing away a few ideas there from Zac for the future of our business. Look, we're a zipline and ecotourism business based out on Waiheke Island, so 17 kilometres from downtown Auckland. And in 2009, my business partner Chris Oliver and I had the idea for a new business that we talked about a thing called commercial conservation, or the idea that a commercial business could have conservation outcomes or collaborate on conservation, and the two things could go hand in hand. And we spent a lot of time looking at how that might be achieved. And I awoke one morning to something I hadn't seen since high school, and Chris had sent me a Venn diagram, and within it he'd put together how 3 parts of the New Zealand tourism scene at that point fitted together, which was an aspiration for people to get outside. It was mild adventure, and it was immersion in New Zealand's nature and the outdoors. And we then set about a process of, we estimated by the time we broke ground in 2012 that we put about 3,000 hours into planning for the business, and we were prepared to accept that we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't have a background in adventure tourism, so we took what we call a really deep dive into this, and we visited zip lines in Costa Rica, Alaska, Utah, Hawaii, Nevada, and we went and engaged with a lot of business owners to find out. And so I think we use the phrase, we took a really deep dive into the weeds. And I think that lends itself to business planning, because when you get into that kind of granular detail, you start to understand, what you're trying to achieve. And it's certainly, thinking about Zac's first point there, it gave us that broad overview of where we were going. So we fast forward to, we broke ground. We started ziplining in 2012, carried our first paying customers, and things were going gangbusters really until the first part of 2020, when suddenly COVID hit. And as I said on the LinkedIn post, John, after you'd asked me to speak on this, I said this was the point at which most of us had never heard of Wuhan, and we didn't know it had a highly popular live meat market, and obviously we didn't know what was just around the corner. But we had, by that time, we developed a really successful business, and that was when our first interaction with Westpac had started, and we were starting to look at a new location in Kaikoura.
Cool, thanks, Gavin. And look, certainly, yeah, sort of 3 years and 3,000 hours of planning it. You know, it sounds like a lot, but I mean, there's always a lot at stake, right? You know, there's hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars being invested into these businesses that people are looking to start up, and a lot of sweat equity. So yeah, why wouldn't you do your homework? And it sounds like a good amount of due diligence. It's in some nice places along the way. So if we we'll get to the kind of a little bit more of the sort of the uncertainty and the current situation in a minute, but just talk to us about, I guess, some of the challenges that you have faced in your planning along the way, Gavin.
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest challenges that we first encountered was that when we opened in 2012, there was only one commercial zip line in New Zealand. There was one in Australia. So we were entering what was really what would you call an immature market. And whilst that was a great opportunity, when you spoke to people here about things like zip lines, they didn't understand what they were. And the common phrase here was flying foxes. And so we talked to people, we were going to build a flying fox, and immediately people think about the kind of thing that you see in playgrounds. And we had to say to them, no, look, that's a flying fox. This is a real zip line. So there was a process there, which was a challenge of educating the market. We also discovered that there were many more barriers to entry in the international space than we first thought we were going to encounter. It was much harder to get that penetration. And I think that in the end, against forecasts for when we thought we'd get the business into profit, we were probably 12 to 18 months behind that. And there were a couple of, quite challenging moments when we wondered, had we made a mistake? But, we stuck to our guns and we believed in the greater vision. But it was a steep learning curve. And part of that challenge, of course, is that I don't have an adventure tourism background, and nor does my business partner. So my background is corporate travel, and he's a retirement community guy. So here were these two guys that knew nothing about adventure tourism, decided to set up a zipline and ecotourism business. So, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, well, presumably a much steeper learning curve. Were you not sort of focusing so in such a sort of a dedicated way and onto the planning side of things? Hey, Zac, back to you. I've heard you, or I've seen you in print before talking about this. But how many businesses out there? I think you touched on it before. Are actually winging it in terms of who you see coming through your doors, and how sustainable really is this for them?
Good question, John. It does scare me what I'm about to say, but I guess I'll be truthful. So as I think I mentioned, with our business changing, we run a lot of workshops around business planning and strategy and all that sort of thing. And we've been running group workshops where we have about 10 or 15 companies come at once, like literally all at the same time over 2 days. And we've had over 700 mainly SME companies attend these. We also do a lot of like 1 day or 2 day strategic planning with companies like boards and that stuff. But just based on what I've seen from the 700 plus companies coming through our 2 day workshop to do, to actually create their business plan, my gut feel, and this is pretty scary, and this is mainly SMEs, so medium, large will be slightly different. But my gut feel is I reckon at best we have 10 to 15% who have actually had a business plan in the past, meaning pretty much no one. And often they did it when they started out as a startup, or it was several years ago. So, there's a huge amount of SME businesses, especially, who don't do like an annual strategic planning process, which is pretty scary. Now, certainly if you're a medium to large company, I don't have a percentage, but I would say, yes, it's going to be higher than 10 to 15%. But I think the real issue with the medium to large companies is that they, let's say stereotypically, there's a high chance that they actually have a poor to average business planning and strategy process. So even though they have a business plan, I don't think it's doing, the great things that it could do for them, so to speak. And I think, not having a business plan in terms of, what you said, John, about leaving things on the table, not having a business plan, in my opinion, greatly increases the potential for you to hit, those harder times and for unexpected bad things to happen to you as well. And that's when you're really leaving money on the table and you're actually having, like a lot more sleepless nights and that sort of thing. So I think, if you're not doing enough business thinking, you're definitely leaving a hell of a lot on the table and opening yourself up to having more stress than you need to have. So certainly, John, just in summary, I'm hoping that after today's chat, there'll be a heck of a lot more companies who have listened to our conversation that will jump on and, start to create a business plan and not wing it, leaving so much on the table.
Cool, thanks, Zac. And what are some common, I guess, mistakes that people make, or things to look out for if you're very new to this process and wanting to make some positive change? What are things to look out for?
I think the biggest issue or biggest mistake is that many businesses, I think, John, actually feel that they don't even need a business plan.
Sure.
To me, that's pretty no offense to anybody listening, but that means, you're just going to accept life happening to you and your business without, being able to get on the front foot and be really proactive to make that potential awesome future you have that could happen actually happen. So, I think it's just many people, don't even think they need one. They just do day to day. And man, I'd be having major regrets if I was, in the later end of my life, knowing I hadn't done a business plan. I think, some other common mistakes are that people who do have a business plan, they somehow let it gather dust at the bottom of their drawer. They never quite know how that works physically. But what I mean by that is they actually do a business plan, but then they never really look at it again. So that's, like a really massive lost opportunity. Another issue that we've touched on already, John, you and I, was, and I'm sure that Gavin doesn't do this as well, but, many people create that 53-page business plan, which, is like a template from you've Googled on the internet or some free government website. Like, hey, there's a place for those 53-page business plans, especially if you're potentially going for funding. But on a day-to-day basis, if you do a 53-page business plan, it's just going to scare you. You're going to do nothing. And I think the problem with a 53-page business plan is that us being humans, we can only focus properly on a handful of things. And if you write a 53-page business plan, you're going to have 135 things to do. And there's no way you can do that. You've got to always be working to a high priority list, like a top 5 or a top 10. And I think that's a mistake that many business plans take, or have, should I say, is that they don't actually help you to really get down to the nitty gritty of what the most important things are. I think another thing is that you just don't actually, not necessarily look at the business plan where it gathers dust, but don't even set time in your calendar to actually make real progress on it, to work on those strategies and that sort of thing. I think another mistake people think is they have way too narrow thinking. They might do what the basic SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, that sort of stuff that most people know to do. And yeah, hey, that's a valuable tool, but there's so much more you can actually be thinking about. So I think because they don't have the right business thinking questions, they end up with like a C-grade business plan. And I think as well, they often, rush their business plan, which in my view is pretty silly. Another mistake is that you do it once and you think, I'll do it in 3 or 4 years' time. You need to have an annual planning session, and also you need to be, there's no right or wrong as to how often you update it or reconsider it, but it's even more than annual as well. Just the last few quick mistakes I see, John, is that people don't include their team in the business planning process. So in my view, team is way smarter than just me, as simple as that. So include your team. Another issue is that people do a business plan, but they don't actually share it with their greater team. Your team wants to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. So you want them to get excited. So, share your business plan. Yes, you might not share every intimate detail, but 98% of your plan you can actually share. I think the big lesson here, John, for me is that, for companies to actually just do some big picture thinking and create a business plan. And if they do that, then they'll have some accountability to actually deliver on it. So I think the big thing is, don't have the mistake of doing a plan but never doing anything about it. So use it for good. Simple as that.
Cool, thanks, Zac. A lot of good stuff there, and one of the things that I heard was that came through was practice, right? Like I guess for many of us, it's very easy to go to work and to be on autopilot versus the kind of more sort of planning and strategic sort of thought process. Really, sort of it's a bit more challenging. So sometimes it's easy to be busy with other things, but much like anything else, you got to put the practice in. So that's one thing that really stood out to me there, Zac. Thanks for that. Okay, so if we bring the conversation now into this current period, where many of the best laid plans have gone completely out the window, some businesses have had to make drastic changes to survive. And many of you might be asking yourselves, how on earth do I even begin to plan for the future when there's just so much uncertainty and volatility out there? And is it really worth even doing? there's a bit of irony in the current situation. Over recent months, there's probably a few or many business owners and managers out there that have been used to moving at a really fast pace, and their sort of normal operating rhythm, and in some instances they may have been brought to a complete standstill, stuck inside their bubbles, unable to operate their businesses. They might have time on their hands, but perhaps are struggling with just how to kind of deal with what's in front of us. Gavin, in an industry that has been just the hardest hit by COVID-19 and border closures, your business must look very different to what it did 2 years ago. How have you had to change your approach with respect to planning, in respect of EcoZip Adventures?
Yeah, look, John, it's been a fairly steep learning curve the last 18 months. So to put it in context for our listeners today, normally in the tourism space, we're planning about 2 years ahead. We're thinking about what serious groups are coming through in the future. We're looking at things like air connectivity. We're looking at things like what cruise lines are moving vessels into our operating region. And so that's what we're thinking about. So on a day-to-day basis, our operations people are just making sure we can get customers through the door. But as a business owner and a planner, you're trying to look that much further ahead to what kind of resources you might need and where you might be going. And obviously, that's gone completely. And we now, the reality for most tourism businesses, that we're not planning much further than a week ahead. And it's dispiriting. I mean, it's hard. It's difficult to do because you just don't know what life's going to throw at you next. And you keep hitting challenges. You keep hitting things you're not expecting. The MLB baseball player Yogi Berra had a great phrase, and it's one of those things I come back to. And he said, when I come to a fork in the road, I take it. And for me, I mean, that just means to do something. Inactivity is not an option. And I think that refers back to something that Zac said about, that constant review. A business plan, that document, shouldn't be a static document. It should be a living and breathing thing, and it should be dynamic, and it should be changing. For me, in the tourism sector at the moment, we've lost some of our traditional planning tools, which we'll probably talk about in a while. So for me at the moment, the things that are really important to me are my networks, and that's staying in touch with other business owners, testing my ideas, telling them what we're working on, finding out what other people think will happen, and really just drawing on people around you, stakeholders, competitors, even your bankers, to find out what they think the future might hold. And that's how we're planning. But it's small increments. And I think that as a business owner, you have to accept that the decision you make today is based on the best information you have today. Don't beat yourself up if you make a decision and find in a month or 2 months you're wrong, particularly in this market. Inaction is not an option. You have to keep moving forward and accept you're going to make some mistakes.
That's great advice. Thanks, Gavin. And look, absolutely agree with that. And I think certainly a problem sort of shared as a problem halved, as they say. And certainly from the bank's perspective, we're having lots of good conversations with our customers as all sorts of kind of ideas are thrown around. Some just survival based, others potentially a change in business, and some blue sky stuff. So it's great. It's great to have the opportunity to kick these ideas around with business owners. Zac, what about you? So you're obviously in touch with a lot of businesses, your customers and the business community. How has the focus changed for these businesses over the last couple of months in terms of what you're seeing and the work that you're doing with them?
Well, I think Gavin gave a really good summary. He's obviously living real life with his business. But what I'm seeing is that, first of all, many businesses are actually a little bit better equipped to actually handle this current COVID disruption because they had it last year. Now, of course, if you're tourism, retail, hospitality, education agents, whichever other industries are obviously hugely impacted, hey, that doesn't apply to you. But I think for those who are just a bit affected by COVID, they are probably, a bit better handled purely because they've had some experience before. So I think, in terms of what's the impact of the last couple of months been on planning and how has it changed, I think, it really comes down to, first of all, whether you're focusing on survival or not. Now, of course, if you're focusing on survival, then, almost like Gavin's explained, you're doing a lot of short-term thinking, short-term sprints, trying this or that. But I think if you are one of the businesses that are, finding it tough, but survival at the moment is not the number one thing. You're going to survive, but just businesses, greatly down for the obvious reasons. I'm seeing that a lot of those businesses, or what I'm recommending, is that you still actually put a lot of time into thinking, how can your business be more successful in the long term? Because you might have a little bit more downtime over the past couple of months, and that'll give you time to actually think about, even getting onto things that you just wouldn't otherwise have the time to do. So that's for those businesses not facing survival. If survival, then as Gavin said, it's literally really short term. I'd be saying, almost like week by week, you're going to want to make sure that you've got a whole lot of tactics to do. So it's going to be probably less strategic, more just doing stuff. And like Gavin said, checking what sticks and what doesn't, and then pivoting's the wrong word, but changing what you need to if things aren't working. So I think you need to make sure, if you're greatly affected, you really know what your number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things are to do this week. You don't focus on like number 13, 37, and 98. That's not going to mean that you have, you're upping your chance of survival. And again, as I said, in summary, John, even if you're not facing survival, if you're one of the lucky businesses who aren't, make sure that you use your time with, you're going to have a bit more downtime to put time into how you can be more successful in the future.
Thanks, Zac. And look, I think that aligns, certainly aligns with kind of our perspective, where, we absolutely get it in the current environment. Plans are hugely susceptible to change. They will change. The external environment continues to change. A lot of the plans that the planning that we're seeing, is primarily with survival in mind, and it's where businesses have been brought to a halt, or they're significantly down on turnover, and they look, the numbers and the plans look very different to what they normally would. It's important to note from a banker's point of view that we do understand, we get it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. These circumstances are unprecedented for us all, and that as bankers, we're absolutely in this together with you, and we see it as being very important that we tackle these challenges together in partnership. Of course, each industry and each line of business, as I think you've alluded to, Zac, has its own challenges. Supply chains, customer behaviour, capital requirements, reg, and many other different things. And at Westpac, our teams now specialise by industry, so that we can really try and get under the skin of the industry specific effects, whether it be now or hopefully once we kind of get out of some of this sort of dire situation, and really sort of help you chart a path for future success. From a bank's perspective, just once again, any plan is really useful for us, because it does help us to determine what options are available, in the form of our own support, but what might be available externally, whether this be outside help, advice, investment, equity, or many other things. So can't sort of stress enough how important it is for us, but also that we get that things may look a little different now to what they normally would. And look, during these times, we would we really want to be in as much contact with our customers as we can. We'd sort of expect in many cases to be as in as much regular dialogue with our customers as perhaps they would be with their advisors. We're here also just to discuss budgeting and forecasting, and in a minute I'll pass back to Gavin and Zac for their views. But before I do, I just share a few high-level views from our perspective. You might be asking, what's the difference between a budget and a forecast? Don't worry, I'm not going to sort of bore you with a lengthy sort of description of this. There's plenty of takes and definitions online regarding this. But look, simply as we see it, a budget is generally something that's set annually, can be a reasonably detailed representation of future results, versus a forecast, which is more of an estimate of what will actually be achieved based on the current run rate. So often a little bit more high level, limited to sort of, maybe high level revenue and profitability line items, as well as potentially a cash flow, and updated at regular intervals, perhaps monthly or quarterly. Look, without getting too tangled up in definitions, consider either of these. Consider a budget to be a plan for where a business wants to go, versus a forecast being more of an indication of where the business, where your business might actually be going. Look, the numbers, as bankers, the numbers are pretty important to us. They're a key piece of information for, helping us to assess that your banking facilities, are suitable and fit for purpose. Can you afford them? That's pretty important. But also, are they sufficient to help you do what you're aiming to do in the future? We'll come back to just in a minute to talk about a few do's and don'ts and a few helpful hints. But first, back to you, Zac, as an advisor, but also an accountant by trade. I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic of budgeting and forecasting, and how and when these fit into the overall planning process.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I just want to give a partly unrelated tip, first of all, just to everyone listening. And it's not exactly rocket science, but my big view, I suppose it comes from, as John said, I was an accountant in the olden days, and that was a great skill to have because, in my belief, numbers don't lie. So I think, a challenge I put out to everyone listening is, what are your numbers telling you that you're missing and not acting on? Certainly, when I start with a client, the first thing I do is, look at their numbers, get under the bonnet, because that's how you get a great understanding. So I think, if you want a challenge, my challenge to everyone listening is, what numbers are you actually ignoring and not doing something about? And I probably would say, hey, go back to when you weren't so affected by COVID as well, because that's when I suppose you'll see normal trading numbers. But yeah, what are you ignoring, or what could you do about it? Hey, so just to your question, John, in terms of, what are my thoughts on budgeting and forecasting and how they fit into the planning process? First of all, I'll start with a budget, and it fits into the business planning process from both a top-down and a bottom-up perspective. Let me just explain what I mean there. I'm in favour of what I call a top-down approach. A top-down approach is when the business owner / management team effectively agree what profit they want to do for the next 12 months, and then they go ahead and they do a budget, and they see what the heck they need to do, sales, GP-wise, cost control, etc., cost investment, to actually come up with the profit that they want to make, which is their short-term view of success. Now, how that ties into planning is because you come up with these numbers to get the profit you want, and obviously you've then got to go through and create the strategies and the tactics to actually deliver on those numbers. Now, a bottom-up approach to budgeting, which many people do and has its place, is you have separate considerations of what you think you can do sales-wise, what you think you can do GP-wise, and what costs you think you need to incur to actually achieve the sales and the GP. And then the profit is just the number at the bottom of the budget thrown out. So you get the surprise of, oh, my profit's going to be X, not actually necessarily what you want it to be. So in that case, in my view, you're probably not pushing your company as hard as it could, because I feel that if you have a profit-based budget approach, you're probably going to end up having a slightly higher sales target, GP target, etc. So that's kind of, you can come at it from both angles. But I guess the ultimate aim of a budget is to have an agreed financial profit target or budget for the year. And the planning, you then have to make sure that the actual planning will obviously, with your strategies, deliver on the budget. Hey, speaking of forecasts as well, it's incredibly important. And John, you did a good job of defining the difference of a forecast or versus a budget. But when I was the CFO for Flight Centre in the head office back in the early 2000s, we were, your ASX listed company. I was updating the forecast literally daily, probably sometimes a few times a day, because things were always changing. And I think that so many SME businesses especially just don't even have a budget or a forecast. Quite a few have a sales top line budget. But my view is you need to, do a full budget, break it down for the year into monthly to bring that extra accountability, but also make sure you actually run a forecast, because a forecast ultimately is actually more important. That's actually what you're going to achieve based on, that's your reality check of how things are going. So, I think, if you're not happy with what your forecast is showing as well, it'll help you to reconsider your business plan potentially, but also drive some short-term actions to actually create better results. I think the big thing is with a budget as well, just like a business plan, if you don't refer back to it, it's not going to be worth much, okay? So it's a great tool to bring accountability. So, John, just to summarise, again, you want to have both a budget and a forecast, and they're very important. So thanks, yeah.
Thanks, Zac. And look, I think we'll touch on it in a second if we've got time. But certainly, yeah, the cash flow piece is pretty damn important right now. As far as that forecasting. Hey, Gavin. So you've referred to your very detailed approach to business planning. What about your approach to the numbers side of things? How have you approached this? When in the planning process do you begin? And what tools have you used?
Yeah, look, we nowadays we tend to talk about pre-COVID, don't we? Pre-COVID and with COVID. And if we look at the Kaikoura project, we started on the financial planning for that really before we'd even decided that was where we were going next. And we identified 3 South Island locations, and then we started looking at the key milestones in there, which would, what were the things that would help us achieve our objectives for those locations. So actually, before we'd even put the first page of the business plan together, and the business plan that came out from Kaikoura, I don't think it was Zac's 53-page business plan, but I think we might have been getting up there. But we did put together a detailed plan. But that started about 2 years before we made the decision to go there. And look, and a lot of it is about seeking the right information sources. It's about trying to be as well informed as you can, and that means going out to as many information sources. So in the tourism space, we have regional tourism organisations, often allied to economic development, and they're a mine of useful information. We have some great trade associations like Tourism Industry Aotearoa and others, and Tourism New Zealand pre-COVID, when market conditions were a little more stable, were a great source of information. So you need to be a sponge for that information, and I think it's important to echo a point that Zac made there around those budgets. Is they need to be dynamic, they need to be changing, and you need to accept that sometimes that they may not tell you the numbers you want to see. And as I said, I do a little bit of consulting to small businesses, and it's really important to remember that if your model isn't conforming to reality, change your model, because reality will not conform to your model, and that's the most crucial thing. And right now in a market, and even as Zac said, with businesses who are not massively affected by the impact of COVID as tourism, hospo and say business events are, you have to make sure that your model is conforming to reality and not the other way around.
Thanks, Gavin. Yeah, I like that, and then also just the kind of the myriad of the information that's out there in this kind of the public domain, and just really sort of using that and soaking all of that up. I think that's a great tip. We
even asked some competitors. We actually went out to our competitors and said, "Hey, how's your business performing?" And bizarrely, they told us. So think the unthinkable.
Yeah, I guess don't assume, right?
Yeah.
Hey, look, I'll just probably just a couple of sort of final sort of observations from a banker's perspective before we look to head towards some Q&A. But look, certainly as bankers, we do love the numbers, and again, they're very important to us. We have a responsibility to be making sure that we can support you with suitable banking facilities, and facilities that you can afford. And it's hard for us to do that without a budget and a forecast. We've talked about cash before. Often we'll see a P&L budget, which is a really good start. But what is equally, if not more important, is your cash flow. You might be forecasting some really good results on paper, but do you have the wherewithal to actually get there? How will your cash flow be impacted? Similarly, the balance sheet budget or forecast will help us to understand, what options are available to, help you get to where you want to get to, whether it be survival, growth, change of tack, and what impact those plans are going to have on your business liquidity and equity. How prepared is your business to withstand the expected and the unexpected. Relativity, ideally your budgets and your forecasts do reference back to the prior period. This does help us, greatly, again, understanding any gaps that may need to be bridged, often cash flow related, working capital, fixed assets, how you're going to fund all of these, and realistic. Sometimes we see budgets that look very different to that of the prior year. I mean, clearly, this current sort of environment is a good example of that. And then in other times, things might be looking really, really rosy in the period ahead, and the numbers might look a whole lot better than perhaps last year. That's not to say that these numbers aren't achievable, but from a banker's point of view, we're going to want to understand what the assumptions that you have made in support of your budget or your forecasts are. These are really helpful to us. We see and are used to working with a wide range of different budgets and forecasts, from the basic to the detailed, depending on the complexity of your business and your resources. The key thing is we do want to understand and test your assumptions. Often at present, we are seeing a lot of range forecasting being done. So where businesses might be sort of forecasting a sort of a low, medium and high case. And this is, really useful, in partnership for us to determine, what options may be available and how we might approach, a number of different scenarios. Look, these things should be sort of true and applicable within your business as well. Allowing owners and managers to stop and take a look at, how their business has performed to their budget, and look for reasons for any variance. Reflection is really important, and lessons can be learned that will improve both forecasting and the management of your business. Look, I think we're just sort of we're running a bit short on time, so we might just wrap the discussion part of the session up there. So thanks, Zac and Gavin, for all of your wonderful insights. Look, please do stay tuned. We are now going to open up the discussion from with some questions from the audience, and then we'll look to wrap things up at close to 11. So just looking at the chat box here, just give me a second. In the current environment, how would you weigh up the short-term and long-term planning when the future is uncertain? I think we've sort of touched on that a wee bit, but Gavin, do you want to just give us your views on that?
Yeah, look, short-term planning is, in my industry at the moment, short-term planning has never been more important, because that's really all we can affect. You still need a long-term view. You need to know where you want to be. You need to know where you might be in 2 or 3 years' time. What I'm running with nowadays is less formal than probably pure forecasting. It's almost like scenarios, and we run what we call a base, a probable and an optimum scenario, and those things are changing. Zac said when he was at Flight Centre, he would change his budgets, sometimes daily. Ours aren't changing quite as much as that, but they're probably changing weekly in response to things. So yes, you need to have a long-term view, because it's a bit like it's a roadmap. If you don't know where you're ultimately going, you can navigate the local roads, but you don't know how you're going to get onto the big road that's going to really cover the distance for you. So I think it's a combination. Focus on the short term, but also have an eye on the long term view. Would you, Zac? What do you think?
Yeah. I'll just add one thing. Totally agree with what you said, Gavin. The one thing I'd add as well is that despite obviously short term, lack of clarity for all the obvious reasons, and the total focus that we have to have on cash flow, etc., I think that, as I say, some people had it's dire, and that's the reality. But let's assume that you probably can get through this somehow. My other advice would be to answer that question: the mix between short and long-term planning is, even in today's super challenging circumstances, find the time to do some things today that you'll actually get the payoff in late 2022, 2023, because things take a long time to come to fruition. So yes, you've got to do the day-to-day and make sure you survive, but actually try and find that extra hour or two to still, try and build that relationship with some operator overseas, or try and, whether it's developing your staff or whatever, do some things today that ultimately you'll get a medium-term payoff, because that's how great companies are born. They do the things today that ultimately they get huge success from tomorrow. And that's why most companies never quite succeed as much as they can, because they're so busy, just doing the day-to-day, which in today's scenario is very acceptable most of the time. So yeah, what can you do today that will actually have a medium to long-term payoff, and you'll look back in a few years and think, far out, I'm so glad I did that in October 2021. Thankful, be thankful.
Well, thanks, gents. Look, I think there's a question that sort of follows on quite nicely from that. In markets that have been significantly disrupted by COVID and the subsequent health response, is there value in investing more into R&D / moonshot type innovation projects, considering the whole market is shifting or under disruption? It's a really interesting one. Zac, what are your views on that? I mean, I think you've sort of talked to that just now.
Yeah, I mean, certainly what I just said, but I'd also say that it needs to be filtered by your short-term cash flow, as simple as that, because reality is, you need to make sure that you're doing everything you can to survive and be able to flourish, let's say, later in 2022 into 2023, and cash is king, as we all know. So what I'd say is, hey, if you can do some R&D things that aren't going to cost the earth and you can build them into your short-term forecast, then great, give it a go. But if you're going to be talking about a big investment, and let's say it's a few $100,000, and that's a lot of money for most businesses, that could be the difference between what pushes you over the edge or not. So as I say, if it's low cost R&D, I'd say now's the time. Otherwise, I'd say wait another few months just to get a bit more clarity if there's some pretty high level stuff, if you're teetering on the edge.
But I guess it's keeping in that mindset is and keeping being ready for perhaps the opportunity or the good idea is is a really good start. What tools or software can you recommend to create, update, and manage business plans with forecasting? Also, how often do we need to meet to update the strategies, tactics, and any KPIs to track? Gavin, I'd just be interested sort of what you're using in your business as far as some of your software.
Yeah, look, we're pretty basic. I mean, we're using Xero and pulling stuff out of there. It then interfaces with our reservation system, which we then drop into things as simple as Excel spreadsheets. And I spend a lot of time up to my elbows in a lot of very detailed Excel spreadsheets. So I'm not a great user of software apps for those kind of things. I'm kind of probably a little old-fashioned with that, and Zac's probably got some better ideas. No, he's shaking his head feverishly.
Well, I guess what I'd say is, like, I'm a big believer, like Gavin. An Excel spreadsheet does the trick. Like, there's things like Spotlight and all these other things. I think, no offense to Spotlight or anything, I think they're kind of pretty average. Like, I have clients try and use them, but actually they're not as good as a spreadsheet. They're just not as good. So to me, an old-fashioned spreadsheet is great. In terms of software or whatever to run your business plan, if you want to get tricky, you could put it onto Asana, Trello, Monday.com, all that sort of project management type stuff. I just get my clients, we give them a big cardboard template and they just write it down and they put it on their wall so they never forget about it. But I think it's whatever works for you. Depends if you're IT savvy or not. But as I say, there's some business plan software out there, but most of it's pretty average. But I'm like Gavin, and I think basic stuff actually works really well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, gents. And look, I mean, we see a number of different things. I mean, we obviously see the likes of Xero and the different sort of subscriptions and functionality that helps customers track their short-term cash flow and assist with predictions and so on. Clearly, your accountant or your advisor is a good source, hopefully, of information. I mean, there's plenty of industry specific pieces of software and so on that might be quite sort of specialized, as well as some of those apps that you've referred to, Zac. But I do really like the keep it simple, and certainly I guess if you're this is all quite new to you and perhaps you're new to business or your business is quite small, I imagine tying yourself up in unnecessary knots is not going to be overly sort of productive to the whole sort of planning cause. So I agree with those. Thanks for that. Zac and Gavin, how much have your business plans changed since March 2020? So Gavin, we've sort of heard from you, and things have obviously changed a lot, and even in recent weeks with the news around Waiheke. Zac, what about your business? Your business, with Nurture Change being one of them, which is kind of on ice, one assumes.
Yeah. So I guess Nurture Change, which are our business retreats, and it's, I didn't mention at the start, but the reason we launched the 5-day business retreats was because of business planning. people come along, hear great speakers, but they get downtime to think about their business. So that's like literally, it's a business planning approach, and it does work well. So that is literally on ice. Lucky for us, we had another business which does pretty well. So it didn't affect us too much, although we did have a team we've had to bring into our other business. So we're just really with nurture change waiting, and hopefully we can do one in late 2022. That's the plan, whether it's in Australia, Fiji, Hawaii, whatever. We'll see where we get to. But in terms of the current day job, which is business changing, which is the business advisory and business coaching, I guess the biggest changes for us, well, first of all, a lot of our clients have been majorly impacted. We have plenty of clients in the obvious industries, but everyone's been impacted. So I guess we've had to come up with new ways. We've got a lot more into becoming, I wouldn't say that we're thought leaders yet in employee wellbeing and mental health, but certainly we're a lot more skilled. So that's been really important to be able to support our clients on a mental health and employee wellbeing perspective. The other big thing is obviously just the lack of ability to do face-to-face. Like, we do one-on-ones often face-to-face. Well, that's all on Zoom now, but also our workshops. We run, countless workshops every year with, maybe 25 or 30 people attending. Well, we can't be doing those. So we've had to move everything onto online, mainly using Zoom, and it's going very well. And the feedback is that it's 99% as good as in person. So that's been positive. And I guess as well, we've just been actually probably got busier because more companies need a hand. But definitely has impacted us. Yeah.
And look, I think certainly for us all, the kind of the new form of interacting, doing business, communicating, it's certainly been a new skill to learn. But it's also been great that there's many things that do carry on. So, hey, time for one last question. How have you been projecting your cash flow forecasts or seen other businesses doing this with the uncertainty of when alert levels will change, i.e. when you'll be open, closed? Just a little bit from the bank's perspective. I mean, just back to the sort of, often we'll be looking at things, really from a scorched earth perspective around, how much liquidity or how much equity, how long can we hold on for? I know that's a sort of a bit of a dire way to look at things, but it's, very much kind of with survival in mind and really just sort of trying to understand kind of what the options are, especially for our kind of most affected. Have you gents got anything to add?
No, I think probably that the scorched earth analogy is about fair. I mean, that's what we tend to focus on at the moment as we look at the absolute worst case scenarios. We've accepted that we can no longer predict when alert levels might change and what that might do to our business. So for us at the moment, it really is. I think. I've owned my own businesses for 25 years. At no time has my financial planning ever been as responsive and as opposed to proactive than it is at the moment. And that's and it's an acceptance. And one of the challenges for most business owners and entrepreneurs is that we're all secretly control freaks. And so this is why this is so hard for us, because this is one part of our world that we can't control. So it is at the moment, we run kind of scorched earth type scenarios and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest thing you can do is, totally take that worst case scenario, scorched earth, etc. But the most important thing, apart from knowing the scorched earth situation or scenario, is do something about it. So don't be a possum and no head in the headlights. Now, I appreciate most people listening are going to do something about it, but the reality is the question to ask yourself is, are you doing every single thing about it that you could? And I'd suggest that most people could still be doing a little bit more, whatever that means. So as I say, do the worst case scenario. And yes, it might look very depressing and somber, but information is power. So make sure you do something about it, whether it's talking to Westpac, whether it's talking to whoever, whether it's just trying to, get some money from friends and family, whatever it might be, because the reality is, times will, in theory, be a bit more normal sometime soon, whatever the time frame might be. So you need to do, and I know that, hey, naturally, everyone or most people listening on this are probably entrepreneurs. Of course, you do everything, to make your business survive. But I'd suggest there's probably still a few things that you're not doing. So I guess the question is, don't be a possum in the headlights. Literally give it your best shot and know that you're doing everything possible. And then whatever happens, you look back and think, well, I gave it my best shot. We got through it. And if you didn't, well, hey, I don't want that to happen. But at least you'll know, well, I couldn't have done anything else. I literally gave it my best shot. Simple as that.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. And we actually did a webinar the other week with Sir John Kirwan on mental wellbeing, and one thing that stuck with me, which I think sort of relates to that, is do one thing. I think when if you're struggling, which I guess is sort of putting one foot in front of the other, and ideally keeping on going. So yeah, look, that really relates. So looking at the time, that's all we do have time for this morning. It's just about 11 o'clock. Thank you, Zac, and thank you, Gavin, for joining us this morning. And thanks to all our audience, our business community, our customers, advisors, and many others for dialing in. We hope that you will take away some food for thought as you ponder how you are going to approach periods ahead. Westpac's got a range of support measures available to help you manage through these challenging times. So please do get in touch with us and watch out for our call. If you've got any follow-up questions of any of us, you can, or you do require assistance, you can email us at events@westpac.co.nz. We will be sending out an email in follow-up to the session with a recording and some helpful links. Please do join us again next week on Wednesday, the 20th of October, between 10 and 11 a.m. When our very own Amber McKnight will host a discussion on the new set of HR challenges that businesses face, staff wellbeing through lockdowns, the global mass resignation, and let's not forget the vaccination debate. Amber's going to be joined by Samantha Gadd, who is founder director of Humankind and the EX Design School, as well as Gillian Service, who is an employment lawyer and partner of legal firm Minter Ellison Rudd Watts, and they'll be discussing these new challenges and how businesses can adapt to meet evolving expectations and ensuring that they keep their employees happy and safe. So look, thanks again. Have a safe and restful weekend, and yeah, we really appreciate you dialing in. Ka kite.